Hello and welcome to my research presentation. So I will dive right in. I'm going to be researching the effects of perceived racial discrimination on group membership, identity formation, and mental health among multiracial college students. All right, here we go. So here's the issue, and this is the statement of the problem. So individuals develop racial identities, and every single one of us do. However, for the multiracial individual, identity achievement is kind of a difficult process, and or it's a sensitive time, a vulnerable time. And while understanding our racial identification encompasses the way we understand ourselves, the multiracial individual sometimes never reaches that level, or they have a hard time understanding who they are and where they belong. And so research has demonstrated that there's unique issues faced by this population. The three I'm focusing on that I have found over and over in the research that I've conducted: perceived racial discrimination is huge, identity exploration is an issue, and group membership tends to be a problem. So let's go on. So delving into these three, what is it about these three topics or issues or categories that the multiracial individual faces? Well, perceived racial discrimination, it's emerged as one of the highest ranking risk factors for mental health and well-being. So perceived racial discrimination is different than blatant racism. Although it can be blatant, it's typically based on microaggressions, physical appearances, and it's known to be like a subtle discrimination, and so it's a little harder to understand, but it's actually super significant and a lot more painful than blatant racism, actually, because you're being rejected very subtly. And there's different biases that are at play. And then what happens is the individual who is facing this type of discrimination, there's four major health issues that have, especially for children, that have come up: depression, ADHD, ODD, and conduct disorder. So there's issues with this type of discrimination. And then what happens for the multiracial individual is there's this identity exploration. And now we know that identity exploration can be a healthy thing. It can be good. We've all read Erik Erikson, and that's part of the process. However, too much exploration is not good. It is it's been shown to be positively associated with mental health issues such as anxiety and depression. And then these multiracial individuals face an issue with group membership. They are susceptible. Members of this group are vulnerable to experience rejection from their in-group, from their out-group, or even both. And so there's rejection that is a huge problem, or that can be a problem. All right, moving on. Okay, so the purpose of my study, as you can kind of gather, I want to expand the research on multiracial individuals by examining the psychological effects of perceived racial discrimination during the process of multiracial identity formation in college students. All right. So there's three theories I'm looking at that all work together in this process of understanding how the multiracial individual understands themselves. And so social identity theory is a huge key here, and this relates to group membership. Social identity theory is basically a person's sense of who they are based on group membership. Now, I'm not going to read everything on this slide. I have a lot of slides, and I will run out of time. So you can see that there's a process involved, and it's conscious and it's unconscious, and there's key concepts to what takes place within the individual being accepted or rejected by a group, and there you go. All right, let's move on. Let's move on. Okay, so multiracial identity formation theory. So now this is another theory that I have my research has to focus on. There are several theories out there for this formation process for this group of individuals. I'm focusing on Dr. Kristen Wren specifically because she connects her theory with Bronhoffenbrenner's ecological systems theory. So what that does is it kind of combines all these systems, because as we're learning in psychology, nothing just happens in a vacuum. Everything is related. And so the physical appearance of the multiracial individual, the cultural knowledge, the peer group, all of these are super influential as an individual with multiracial backgrounds tries to find out who they are. They try to find out who they are, but they have to identify as something, as someone. And there's categories that they can choose. And Dr. Wren has found 5 patterns that these individuals will choose. So they can, the multiracial student will consider the way they look, their cultural knowledge, and it's all related again to this ecological system where everything is working. And again, I'm not going to read everything. I'm not going to define these identity patterns that they can choose, but you can see that they can, this last one, situational identity, they can bounce back and forth. They can say, oh, I'm going to identify with this group because I am a part of this group. I'm half white, so I'm a white person. I'm going to identify as white. Or I'm half black, so I'm going to identify as black now because I'm with black people. So that's possible. Not always. We'll see as we delve deep. So anyway, that's the theory I'm running with. And moving on, the next theory, just again, this is Bronhoffenbrenner's ecological systems theory. And again, you see from my picture here that child development is complex, and it involves our microsystem, meso, macro. I mean, everything is related, and everything means something, and it affects how someone feels about themselves. All right, so next. Okay, so here we are. The research question. Here's my research question. To what extent does perceived racial discrimination predict mental health outcomes, group membership, and self-identification during multiracial identity formation among college students? All right, simple enough, right? Okay. Okay, so my first hypothesis is the source of perceived racial discrimination is a prediction of how a multiracial individual will identify. So group membership is a big deal, and it's a protective barrier. It's a protective factor against mental health issues during this vulnerable time. This identity formation time is a very key sensitive time. And so I'm going to read this because this is a big deal. This is kind of like the meat and potatoes here. So if a black, half white individual faces high levels of discrimination by white people and low levels of discrimination by black people, then that individual might be more likely to identify as black than as multiracial, okay? By contrast, if the black, half white individual faces high levels of discrimination by both racial groups, white and black, then the individual might identify as multiracial. So again, we take Dr. Wren's theory where this individual, the multiracial individual, kind of has 5 categories to choose from. However, group membership and the discrimination they're being received, or the perceived racial discrimination that this individual is facing, will predict how this individual chooses their identity. It's a huge deal. So I'm saying group membership has a protective factor to it. There's something there. Okay, moving on. Sorry, I'm running out of time. Okay, my next hypothesis, I hypothesize that high exploration will be a negative factor. So the source, the in-group, out-group, or dual rejection, again, the source. So what group is this person being discriminated against? So the source of perceived racial discrimination will predict higher levels of identity exploration, which will result in a significant relationship between identity exploration and mental illness. So basically, come here. Perceived racial discrimination by in-group, out-group, or rejection from both may predict high levels of exploration. And as we see with social theory, with social identity theory, high levels of exploration is a bad deal. That means depression, anxiety, suicide ideation, and low self-esteem. So because they're being rejected by a group, they're going to have high levels of exploration. Okay, that's that. Next, I'm sorry about the dogs. My next hypothesis is there's more support to be seen. If a multiracial individual has high levels of parental support, that's a protective factor. So I hypothesize that lower levels of exploration, which is healthy, are predicted by a protective factor found in parental support. Parental support, even without group membership, so they're being rejected by groups and they are facing this identity formation crisis, and they're having perceived racial discrimination, they're being rejected by groups. However, they have parental support. That will alleviate, that will lower, there will be less mental health concerns with that, and lower levels of exploration. Okay, next. All right, so here's my diagram. This is it. This is the whole nutshell. So perceived racial discrimination is my independent variable. And here it is. And on this side, on the left-hand side, you see there's protective factors, which that's group membership and that's parental support. So they're accepted by the group. They're loved by parents. They have identity exploration is low, and then they realize who they are. The self-identification is great. However, on this right-hand side, sorry about the dogs, they're being rejected by, there's perceived racial discrimination. Now they're also being rejected by a group, either in-group or out-group or both, 3 options, or there's low parental support. Then they shoot high with identity exploration, which then means a negative for mental health outcomes. They then form an identity. Self-identification is based on their group rejection. So I'm rejected by this group, okay, I'll choose this group over here. Then, even though they choose a group, they're choosing it because they were rejected. So then there's then there's mental health concerns, depression, anxiety, also just a lack of knowing who they are. They'll have low self-esteem, lots of mental health concerns. Sorry about the dogs. All right, here are my measures. I am not going to go through all this because I totally am running out of time. So there are a lot of great measures out there. I have done so much research on measures. I'm choosing based on what these have been formed, what these measures, the constructs they're choosing to measure. So as you see, perceived ethnic discrimination questionnaire, the reliability is high. Racism, multiracial identification, those are 3 right there you can see. Here's another 2 based on group membership. So this is group membership measures. And okay, and on this slide I have resiliency scales and another ethnic identity scale to assess exploration. I am still looking at a few more scales. I want to look at how to, to measure mental illnesses or depression and anxiety, although some of these measures have that in there. Anyway, this is where I'm at, and I thank you. Sorry about my dogs. I hope this video turns out okay. But yeah, that's where I'm at. Thank you.